Welcome to the Divorce Podcast, a podcast that aims to address divorce, separation and co-parenting here in the UK, countering the often sensationalist way it's portrayed in the media, challenging the status quo and driving for reform. On each episode, I'm joined by experts to discuss divorce, separation and co-parenting from different angles and to give their opinions and to debate them. I'm Kate Daly, a relationship counsellor and divorce coach, co-founder of Amicable, the divorce services company, and host of the Divorce Podcast. In this episode, I was joined by Mark Kosminski from Blue Mind, a platform which aims to drive behavioural change, build awareness, and encourage men to share, heal, and grow. Mark and I discussed his divorce and journey of personal growth and self-discovery. He spoke really candidly about his drinking and gambling addiction, which contributed to his separation and subsequent divorce. I was touched by his painful recollection of this period of his life and the impact his behaviour had on his family. There seems to be a real void in support and advice for men going through separation, and as with many in Mark's situation, this lack of support meant his separation continued to fuel his various addictions. We touched on many common struggles that specifically men face whilst going through this, and then healing after a breakup. Fitness and health played a really crucial role in Mark's healing, as did the notion of acceptance and its ability to drive change. We touched on Mark's co-parenting and the journey from no contact to now having a functioning parenting arrangement post-divorce. We also explored the difficulties that are presented when one person moves on earlier or quicker than the other, and how damaging labels can be for both people involved. What emerged from our conversation, and that you'll hear, is a clear need for helping others who've gone through similar situations, and the power of joining together to help those who are feeling vulnerable. I hope you enjoy this podcast. If you really loved this episode or want to hear more episodes like this, then please make sure to rate us on your preferred listening platform. Enjoy the episode. Welcome, Mark.
Kate, thank you very much for the introduction. Great to be on. Thank you.
Oh, it's lovely to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. 1 billion men in your lifetime, that is some feat.
I think the reality is that it won't happen in my lifetime, but if we can, we certainly start putting the wheels in motion. So it has to be about prevention and healing for other men. And we have a vision. We genuinely believe that what we will do is actually prevent physical, mental and emotional health issues. But it starts with healing, right? As you know yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we get to the healing, let's talk about what happened to you. Because, it's a really interesting story, isn't it? So it sounds like you were sort of rocking along and then somehow the wheels fell off. Tell me a little bit about what led to the breakdown of the marriage and gambling addictions and drink driving and everything else.
Sure. I'm naturally very introverted, Kate, and I was working in London in a sales recruitment role, not particularly good at the job, surrounded by extra.
So say interesting choice from an introvert. Yeah.
Well, definitely. I think like most people in sales, you tend to fall into it, and you have a few friends that do it, and they talk about the money they can earn, and you think, oh, that would be good. I'm a father and recently married. Perhaps I should explore this. I realize over time, once you immerse yourself in growth and content, introverts actually make very good salespeople because they're very good at listening and identifying solutions to problems. So sales has now become a full-time job and something that I'm very, very passionate about, and so far so good. So working within that extroverted sales environment, it just felt like you were constantly being told to behave and act in a way that was not very natural to you. So struggling at work, going home to an environment where you were being told what to do, struggling at home, not prioritizing your health. You immerse yourself in self-sabotage, alcohol, drugs. I mentioned lack of exercise, weight management, you put on weight, etc. I found freedom in gambling. I found it as a safe place that I could express myself, no judgment, no initial judgment, no fear if you lose. You just put more money in and you do it again. But it was only over time, over the very rewarding journey of growth over the last 4 years, I realized that I was missing a few things. So there's a brilliant book called Indistractable by Ner Ale. And he talks about why kids are addicted to gaming. And it's the same for adults. And we require three things in terms of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So if I break that down for your listeners, autonomy to make our own decisions and not be judged whether we get it wrong. So for a child, you're told what to do at school, told what to do by your parents. They seek comfort in gaming because they can do whatever they want, and there are no repercussions. It was exactly the same for me as gambling. Being told what to do at work, told what to do at home. I didn't have any autonomy in my life, but I didn't realize that at the time. It makes a lot of sense to me now, and that's been a big part of the healing process and what we coach other men as well. So being in that environment, really struggled with the gambling. It was a horrific experience. I can remember a time where I lied to my wife at the time and said that working late, if I wasn't working late, I would head to the local bookies near London Bridge. I would maybe lose a couple of £100 on either the horses, the dogs, maybe a football match. Suddenly the panic sets in once you lose. You literally run to the cash machine to get another £200 out to win the money back. And the level of consciousness is non-existent, absolutely non-existent. It's tearful even thinking about it in terms of the behaviors. And this would continue, but that feeling of regret and remorse as soon as it was over, and you jump on maybe the last train home, £4,000, £5,000, £6,000, £7,000 down. You think, oh Jesus goodness, I need to hide this from the ex-wife. I need to lie about it, and that causes or adds to the stress and anxiety. So those were the main reasons for the breakdown in the marriage. Were my behaviors, not dealing with the gambling. I immersed myself in binge drinking, working in the city, Thursdays, Fridays. Big rugby fan, so played a lot of rugby on Saturdays as well, which is a heavy drinking culture, Kate. So suddenly you're going to the family roast on a Sunday as well, and you're drinking red wine through to 6-7 o'clock in the evening, and dreading jumping on the train again on Monday morning. So you'd end up drinking four days a week. So that was the reason for the breakdown in the marriage. A couple of days back in 2018, a couple of days before the twins' fourth birthday, my ex-wife sat me down and said we should explore a separation, that I was detrimental to the upbringing of the boys and not a good example of what a man or a father should be. And at the time, disruptive emotions, right?
Wow, that's quite hard hitting, isn't it? Yeah, to hear that.
You're absolutely right. It was soul destroying. You'd committed to a life with somebody, and you know deep down inside you that this is not your true identity, that you're struggling with something. You're not really sure what. Over time, I realized that was very much around that identity and the fact that you inherit belief systems and values from your parents, their parents, teachers, the people that have impacted you throughout your life up until that point. But at the time, it was very emotional, a lot of anger, a lot of hate towards the ex-wife. I'm ashamed to admit that the language was absolutely disgusting towards her, in terms of how could you possibly do this to me? Everything I've done for you, the house, the car. We've recently renovated a house. We have these beautiful twin boys. I was desperate for help, and it was. It felt like she was giving up on me. And I can remember shortly after she left the marital home, she moved in with her parents, and I was traipsing up into London every day, and the whole time I was thinking, I'm not the problem here. You're the problem. You're the problem. My life's going to be absolutely incredible now. I can remember coming back after work, grabbing a couple of bottles of red wine, a couple of pizzas, would sit there in the house by myself, log into an online poker tournament, win some money, and think, this is great. This is absolutely brilliant. And there was a huge turning point for me a couple of weeks into that. I got out of the shower, looked at myself in the mirror, and I'd always considered myself quite a fit person, but evidently I put on a lot of weight. And I could just remember started crying into the mirror. It's like, oh my gosh, this isn't me. I don't know what made me do it, but I just grabbed my mobile phone, hit record, put it up in the air facing myself, and I just made a pledge to myself. I accepted the situation for what it was, set some goals about losing weight, getting fit enough to play some rugby again, and really driving that motivation. I will show her that she is wrong about me. But over time, that motivation changed, and actually showing myself what's possible, because once you immerse yourself in growth and you prioritize your health, wonderful things start to happen. And it's great. The Japanese have got a couple of words which I thought was absolutely brilliant for it. They've got a kensho moment, which is where you grow through adversity. It sounds like you grew through your adversity as well, which is fantastic, and giving back. And there's a Satori moment as well, that once you've grown through adversity, you can then grow through Satori, which is growing through insight. So you're forced to grow. And throughout my life, I was brought up by wonderful parents in terms of love, support, but very scared individuals, a lot of safety. I refer to my childhood as being wrapped in cotton wool or Disneyland. It was just fantastic, beautiful local village, but didn't experience any adversity. So to go through a divorce was my first real rejection, and that ignited growth. I immediately started working out the next day. I continued to record myself for the next 3 months, every day for the next 3 months. I was just like, here I am, one step at a time, starting to lose a bit of weight, starting to feel better about myself. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, the recording of the change, because I kept a diary throughout my divorce, which ultimately helped me sort of put together the service that we offer at Amicable. And it was very painful but useful reading back over that journal and charting the sort of the story, if you like. And now that's a common theme. You know, you talked about, you recorded it, obviously. Mine was 10 years ago, so I'm not sure that we even had camera phones 10 years ago. But let's say we didn't. I didn't think of doing it that way. But, you know, having that record and being able to look back on it and to watch the growth is quite an interesting concept, isn't it? I mean, it sounds like it was a really traumatic time. How did you go from that then to this developing this interest in men's mental health particularly? What takes you from being in your own kind of really awful situation to then actually turning that into something that's going to help other people?
Sure. So it's a really good question. So the separation process concluded with being arrested for drink driving. And I flipped the car, clipped a rock, ended up upside down. And that time in the cell was only for 24 hours, right? So it's not a long time, but it was enough for me. I'd never been in trouble with the police before. It was enough to ignite acceptance in my situation. I would then be handed a book by my managing director I'd never read before, and he gave me a book called Legacy by James Kerr, which is all about business and rugby. And I thought, there's absolutely no way I'm going to read this, but decided to start reading it on the train, and it instantly spoke to me. And once you start gaining insight, you think, oh my gosh, okay, what other insight can I get? Started reading more books. I've now got a library at home.
What was it about that first book then? What was the central message of that first book that sort of propelled you on then? What did you recognise, or what did you see reflected in that book about yourself?
So the book is all about leadership in rugby and how you can relate it to business. And up until that point, I'd been a very average performer in business. I was considered a half decent rugby player and a big rugby fan. And it's all about the All Blacks and mantras and environment. And I basically linked that to my situation. I was like, okay, what's my environment? What mantras can I put in place? How can I hold a high standard of performance? The book it was absolutely brilliant and spoke to me on that level because it was relatable to the sport that I was most passionate about. that has then moved on to investment in personal development, gaining insight into. I read a brilliant book by Vishen Lakhiani, The Buddha and the Badass, which talks about bringing the spiritual side into the workplace as well. And through that, we're educated that giving back is extremely important. And I realized that something that I'm deeply passionate about is accelerating the healing process for other men, because during the time, I remember it being completely soul destroying. My family didn't get it. They're married, Catholic. My brother and sister are married. They just did not get the pain that I was going through in terms of having committed to being a father, not seeing your boys every day, only seeing them once every 2 weeks at the beginning. And then 6 months into the separation, another man entered the phrase, which again was completely soul destroying in terms of, and it's over time I realized and through insight that it's only ego. It's completely your ego that you're up against there. We like to use the phrase that the only person you're against is yourself, and it's so true, Kate. I can remember finding out about the other partner and him living in the house that my family had paid for and paid for the developments, etc. And at the time, you're absolutely furious. You're thinking, this man's going to see my kids more than I'm going to see my kids. And my kids are turning up and they're like, oh, so-and-so's bought me this, so-and-so's bought me that. And you're like, oh my goodness, you're struggling to cope with it. And the real turning point for me there was I was playing rugby, and I can remember we're about 3/4 into the game and I had to come off the pitch because I just burst into tears. I emotionally could not cope with the situation that I was in. And I walked off the pitch. I don't think anyone really realized because it was raining. I walked off the pitch and I just went into the change room by myself, sat there in my shorts, just my shorts, and bawled my eyes out, like I could not stop crying for about 35 minutes.
It sounds like you had a lot of emotion going on then, that you were kind of in touch with. The emotion wasn't being pushed down, it was coming out. But it sounded like it was a struggle to find a way to express that in a way that felt positive, or kind of that was enable some kind of healing maybe. Was that the issue? Was that the difficulty? Or?
Definitely, Kate, you're absolutely right. As men, we don't talk. So I'd always considered myself quite a hard man in that rugby environment. And if we ever go to the pub on a Friday or Saturday, we don't talk about our feelings. We don't talk about what we're struggling with, what our thoughts are. There's a reason why male suicide is at such a high rate, Kate. And having gone through it, and it felt like nobody in my environment could relate. And why would they, right? Unconscious incompetence. We don't know what we don't know. They hadn't been through it themselves. And again, most people in my environment could not relate. I even had one friend turn around to me. I said to him, do you think I'm going to be okay? And I can remember he looked me in the eye and he said, no, I don't think you are. And to experience that, I was like, oh my gosh, like even a friend, even a close friend is communicating that. Time is the healer, as I'm sure you agree. And over time, you continue to focus on what you can control. By going through insight, you realize that you can control only a handful of things. So your actions, your reactions, your mindset, you block out what other people are doing. I took myself off social media, so I wasn't being triggered every day by what I saw from the other side. A lot of through the divorce process, lots of accusations, lots of nasty comments about being a narcissist, and comments such as I'm going to arrange for your family to never see the kids again. But again, through insight over time, through healing, you realize that hurt people hurt people. I hurt this woman. I hurt this woman. I realized that I wasn't performing the best that I could be in the marriage, and I put that down to society, my inability to communicate my feelings and our effective communication during the marriage in terms of putting expectations on each other, expectations that we don't ask for. And that moves us into into co-parenting, and what a fascinating topic that is. What an experience that's been. And once you develop this growth mindset and you move into co-parenting, it's a new area. You're like, right, okay, what can I learn? Who's talking about it passionately? You gain insight. Oh, that works. Oh, that doesn't. Not sure that works. But it's such a challenge, Kate, as you know, especially when you're not on the best of communication with the other side. But it's incredibly hard. Parallel parenting, right? You're not the same person that they were married to. And regardless of how much you think you've grown and you've changed and your intentions and your vision for the future, the other person doesn't see or feel that.
No, and I think it goes back to what you were saying before with you can only control the stuff that you do and that you think, and part of co-parenting or parallel parenting is letting go of that control. And that, half the time, potentially your kids will be doing something that you might not agree with, or you might not like, or might not fit in with your values or the way that you want to bring them up. But that is the nature of this job, isn't it? If you're on this track of parallel parenting.
Definitely, in my opinion, the priority has to be their well-being. Everything else is second nature. Are they being looked after? Are they being supported? Are they being encouraged? And I believe that we're co-creating, co-parenting two extraordinary individuals now. The feedback from school is fantastic. Their friendship group, the way that they approach life, which is just absolutely fascinating. It hasn't always been that way. You have to drive effective communication, which is so hard considering that it wasn't present in the marriage. Advice I'd give around that is what one side preferred to communicate via email or electronically. And as hard as it is, I believe it's better to do it face to face through mindfulness, such as meditation. You learn to control your disruptive emotions. So when you see the person, you don't actually feel the anger anymore. You learn to breathe correctly. Once the disruptive emotions and the ego are taken off the table, you can actually communicate effectively. And the magic that then happens, you're two people having a decent conversation about the people that really matter here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just you talked a minute ago about sort of being on this journey of a mindful journey, and I can't remember the word you used to exactly describe it. But do you advocate a set process for this healing journey? Are there stages and steps to it, or is it something more fluid than that?
That's a good question. It'd have to be fluid. It's definitely tailored to the individual. So we've had since promoting Blue Mind back in December 2021, we've had multiple men reach out to us by us being vulnerable, authentic, sharing our stories of adversity. Men reach out and say, "Hey, I'm struggling. I am struggling. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get over it, but it feels like you can help in some way." So we'll break it down. We will begin with the end in mind. Where do you want to get to? Acceptance is absolutely key. I believe you cannot be in victim mentality. When I was in victim mentality and being driven by the ego, I made poor decisions. I reacted in a way that was not my true identity, I believe. But once you accept the situation, you can drive change.
Well, just let's unpick that a little bit. What does accepting a situation mean? What does it look like if I accept my situation?
Sure. So as an example, in terms of my situation, the acceptance that during that separation phase, that divorce phase, the acceptance that another man is coming into the equation.
So rather than fighting it, rather than trying to stop that from happening, the ability to sit with it and to think that, okay, this is going to happen. It's not something I can control. Therefore, I'm going to have to work with this in my life and work around how I can best still achieve my goals, knowing that this now is part and parcel of the features I've got to navigate. Is that the sense of it?
You're absolutely right. Once you confront the brutal truth of the situation that you are in, and you take action on the things that you can only control, not somebody else, what you can control, you take extreme ownership, you can then drive change. For me, that was the biggest awakening to raising consciousness, raising behavioral awareness. We've had multiple situations recently where men come to us and they tell us their stories about how another man has come into the fold or something outside of their control. But I believe that we're just not taught. It is unconscious incompetence. We are not told about this. You go into a marriage. Jay Shetty talks about how you go into a marriage originally because you're attracted to somebody, or you're attracted to their looks, their intelligence, or their materials, what they have. But we don't connect with people emotionally and spiritually. There is a reason why 42% of marriages end in divorce. I think it's 50 in the US, isn't it, Kate? Something like that. Are we qualifying the situation? Are we qualifying the situation correctly? Probably not, because we live in a society where Instagram, for example, Facebook, filters, all this sort of stuff, alcohol, we socialize with people in a different state or an alcoholic state. And we don't actually connect with people emotionally or spiritually. We don't have difficult conversations. We don't talk about vision for the future. The vision from the conversations we have, the vision for the future conversation goes as far as, yes, I'd like to have kids and a car and a house with a gate. Then we get the better car with the better house. But what do you want life to be like when you're 60, 70, 80? People aren't having those conversations. I know I didn't. Did you?
No. No.
Yeah. So people aren't having those conversations going into a relationship, and then they're committing to a lifetime with a person. Over time, I realized that my ex-wife was not the love of my life or the one for me. But at the time, I found her incredibly attractive. She was intelligent. She was extremely funny, great personality. But I suppose the truth is that someone who sees you struggling would stick by you and realize that that's not who you truly are. And that is the big thing that we coach men around is identity. Who really are you? Break down their behaviors, their beliefs, their values. Where did these values and beliefs come from? We find that they're inherited. Mum, dad, teachers, etc. Once you unpack that, it's like the onion, once you unpeel all that, you really do start to discover who you truly are. And then once you bolt on a give back aspect to it, it's incredible. We truly believe that we will prevent, through continuing to be vulnerable, authentic, help men accelerate that initial healing process, that we will ignite the true identity of a billion men. And we will move to a solution that will prevent physical, mental, and emotional health. It will dramatically reduce divorce. It will dramatically reduce suicide rates as well.
What does it take for a man to reach out to you? Are men coming to you when they're at absolute rock bottom? Or is there a move already to the point where men can come a bit earlier in the process and maybe come out with a spirit of inquiry rather than crisis? Or are we at the stage still where the sorts of services and the help that you're offering really is at the crisis management stage?
Sure. It is, from what we're seeing, it's very much at that crisis stage. It is a case of, help me, I'm drowning. There is an element of unconscious incompetence again. You don't know what you don't know. I was at no point through my marriage I knew that I was unhappy and I knew I was struggling, but at no point did I feel that I needed to reach out to anybody for some assistance. Perhaps that's pride, perhaps that's ego. I'm not sure.
Well, is it social conditioning as well, in that it's not been seen traditionally as the thing that men do? We've known for years, haven't we, that counselling rates are much higher amongst the female population than they are amongst the male population. But to get a sense of the tide turning.
Definitely. So a few men I've spoken to recently have talked about actually proactively going to therapy as well. And not just when they do get to rock bottom, but actually having a yearly check-in. And we live in such a complex world, I believe. There are so many distractions, the media, social media, people constantly trying to gain our attention. And we are constantly being programmed, right? So what best way just to sit down with somebody and just share your thoughts, that safe space, that safe environment. That's where we've seen a very positive response to doing, so every 2 weeks we do a walk and talk in the local area. So we encourage men to turn up. It's a safe environment, non-judgmental. And it's, hey, how are you doing? What's on your mind? And over the last month or so, we've seen men that I've never even met of turning up and just say, look, hey, I've been listening to your podcast, I've been following your content, and it helps. And I feel that I can be vulnerable, and I feel that I can cry, or I feel that I can be open to at least even having a conversation. And that for me is the acceptance part, is that once it comes back to acceptance, once you accept, you can take ownership and you can drive change. I truly believe that.
And do you think it's, the stuff that you're doing now, it's impacting the way we socialise children? So do you think this greater understanding, this desire to break down traditional stereotypes of men being stiff upper lipped or brave or not crying or whatever, do you think now we're breaking those down, we socialise children differently? And I guess, are you socialising your boys differently?
What a good question, Kate. What a good question. I'm very aware of it. I'm very aware of, I think, parenting as a topic is fascinating, isn't it? It is absolutely fascinating in terms of nobody gives you a manual. You learn from your parents, but once you realise that, I had a conversation with my mum the other day, and I said, "Oh, Mum, how come you think that?" She's like, "What do you mean?" And it's like, well, I heard it from my mum all those years ago, and I was like, "Have you ever questioned or challenged the fact that is it a true belief or value? It's inherited." So most of us are walking around parenting as the way we were parented. Times have evolved. Humans evolve. Okay, there's technology is disrupting all the time. So consciousness around how much time our kids are gaming, consciousness around how we talk to our children. I see it on a regular basis when I go to the local park, parents screaming at their children. And there's some really good science around the whole fight or flight thing, around the fact that that can make the child extremely scared individual, or they believe it's an acceptable behavior and they end up being an adult themselves. But more often than not, those parents are struggling from something they haven't healed, from maybe a childhood trauma. How big that trauma might be, who knows? But trauma can be something that happened, but something that didn't happen as well. Something that a need that you needed through your childhood that missed. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So to answer the question, I believe I'm very conscious of the fact of socializing the children. They're making them aware of their mindset, their behaviors, asking them questions around, how come you feel like that, or how come you did that, as opposed to being criticized. Very similar concept to the walks and talks, and creating that safe environment for them to speak, and not forcing my beliefs and values on them, because there is no right and wrong. These are just approaches to life. Mo Gaudat spoke about this the other day on the Diary of the CEO with Stephen Bartlett, right? These are just approaches to life, and people. It's okay for people to have a different approach to life. For me, I had an approach to life. It didn't work. I was miserable. I was so miserable and unhappy. And then to constantly seek external validation or happiness from things, whether it be cars or alcohol or drugs or gambling, that's not me. I did it. I didn't like it. I feel very much at peace at the moment. Meditation has been a big part of my mindfulness practice for the last couple of years. I started during lockdown, and just to sit in the morning in silence with your own thoughts, I believe is extremely, extremely powerful.
And when you came to set up Blue Minds Approach, you did it with two other co-founders. How did you meet them? How did you, I guess, create that safe, trusted space between the three of you to do something as sort of monumental as the Blue Minds Approach?
Well, it's very much in line with. I was listening to your solo episode, and I loved how you spoke about being customer centric, right? And instead of just going out and disrupting, actually listen to what the demand is from people. And I believe by us being vulnerable and authentic, that then allows the customers to come back, share, then be vulnerable and authentic. You then analyze the data, and then you go and build products and services off the back of it. And that's how initially Ed and I started speaking. I'd known Ed for over 10 years. We went on a rugby tour to Dubai, and very big boozy rugby tour to Dubai. It was absolutely brilliant at the time. I'd seen on social media that he'd got a divorce. We weren't particularly close mates, but he walked I was playing in the local park with the twins, football, and he's walked by and he's like, "Oh, back in the area, I hear you went through a divorce." And I was like, "Yeah, I did." And we were both extremely vulnerable, and we just suggested, look, we talked about the heartache, the pain, and how we'd both struggled through the process, not seeing our children, and the behavior from the other side in terms of labeling us narcissists and manipulators. And we're standing there going, look, I don't get it. Can you explain to us, why you believe this is the case? And but then that is considered narcissistic behavior. So we were so determined to help other men because we were hearing more and more friends that were, oh, so-and-so is going through a divorce. So-and-so is going through a divorce. So we went for a coffee. That then led to us, look, this is something we really want to do. We were then introduced to Winston through Clubhouse as well, who had been divorced a few times. So we have that mutual experience of divorce and men that have previously been in not particularly good shape and then committed to exercise. So that is why divorce, separation, co-parenting, fatherhood, leadership, behavioral change, self-sabotage, these are the core foundations of what we know and do.
And so it sounds like this, I'm listening to you talking now and listening to the narrative, and it sounds like the ability to open up is like any other muscle. The more you do it, the more part of your normal day-to-day life it becomes. If someone is standing on the edge of ever sort of having opened up as a man, how do you take that first step?
It's hard. It's painful. It's extremely emotional. It will be in a teary state. But I promise you, it is beautiful. There's that old saying that the truth sets you free, and it's 100% spot on. This is all extremely painful. I liked what you said in your solo episode about that we can't take the pain away, and you will have to go through the pain. 100%, you will have to go through the pain. But if you sit in it and surround yourself with people that are supportive, non-judgmental, you will grow through that pain and you will feel the best you have ever felt. But that's first step.
It's so hard to try and persuade somebody, isn't it, to take that first step. I know, the work that we do, just getting people to have that faith. I guess it's faith, isn't it? Because you can't prove to somebody it's going to get better. People have to take that leap.
Definitely. I had a situation recently where this is relevant to the point that you made, because faith is such a big part of it. I had a friend recently who called me up and said, I need to see you. And I jumped in his car. And the first thing he said to me was, I need to believe in something. I need to believe that Blue Mind is real and you are not just doing it for financial gain. I need to believe that you guys care about other men and that you can make it better. I need to believe. And he just burst out into tears. And the conversation then went on from there, of course. But it's true. Faith is so there's no hope here. Hope is not a strategy. And I believe that belief, that faith, comes from listening to these types of conversations, listening to your story of adversity and you being vulnerable and sharing your divorce and your separation, your co-parenting situation. Me doing my absolute best to share my stories of whether it be during the relationship, after the relationship, the car crash, the gambling addiction. Someone will relate to it. You never know who's listening, who's watching. I had a situation yesterday where a friend who I hadn't spoken to for 12 years, he just dropped me a note out of the blue and he said, "Hey, I didn't realize you'd been through that. And it'd be great to have a chat because I'm not sure I know where I am right now in my life. Perhaps you could give me some pointers." And this happens on a weekly basis. And it's so deeply rewarding, Kate, when people do that, because it feels like you can help. And it feels like you get this as well. I had another situation, very dear friend who helped me in a situation back in my late teens. And he reached out to me. He said, "I'm struggling. I'm drinking too much. I'm not being the father that I want to be. I'm not being the husband I can be." And I said, except just start. That starting is the hardest part. Okay, what bad habits have you got? It's very difficult to destroy bad habits if you don't replace it with a good habit. So he started running, and he would be out. He'd get up half an hour earlier. Half an hour earlier became an hour earlier. He would then send me videos. He's like, "Hey, Cos, I'm out running. I feel incredible." He only ran 5K. The only person against is himself, and that to me makes it all worth it, because that's going to ignite him to be a better father, be a better husband, not go through a divorce process or further self-sabotage or even worse, suicide, etc. So it feels great.
I think being able to walk alongside somebody, stand alongside somebody when they are really hurting like that is one of the most valuable things you can do as a human being. It's the thing that I get the most pleasure out of in all of the bits of my job that I do. Just being able to sometimes on the phone help somebody. If it could be a 5-minute conversation with somebody, if that tips them into a better space, then I always feel good. That's a good day when I've had those conversations. And it's just such a simple thing to do sometimes from our perspective, if it's just explaining what we've been through or explaining to somebody, the little bits of information you glean on the way and how to do things and where there's good resources and that kind of stuff. I think all of that's incredibly important. And it sounds like, the Blue Mind approach is a real hub of understanding, kindness, expertise, and acceptance. So just what is the sort of entry point for people? If people have listened to this and they think, look, I'm in a crisis or not in a crisis, but I can feel myself heading towards one, or I just want to know more about this. How do people interact with the Blue Mind approach?
Sure. So you can reach out to myself. So I'm at Mark Kosminski on Instagram, also on Facebook. But the Blue Mind approach at the Blue Mind approach is on Instagram. There's a website as well. We're on LinkedIn. In the local area, we do every 2 weeks we do a walk and talk. So if you follow us on our social media platforms.
And what's the local area from that perspective? So where is local when you say the local area?
The local area is Oxted in Surrey. So we host walks in and around that every 2 weeks. The plan is because through doing that and then sharing on social media, we've had friends in other locations across the UK that would like to do a walk and talk at the same time. So the plan is to just, that is purely supportive. Turn up, it's completely free, talk. We will happily talk to anyone for half an hour, sit them down, go through some behaviors, give them some pointers. If they'd like to then take that further, it would then go into a coaching session, which is compensated, of course. But we're speaking to large organizations about running workshops, internal workshops for men that are either going through or feel that they might be on the verge of going through these things. So which is exciting because, again, it's all about that give back. And we're just in the process of finalizing our first international retreat as well. So, which will be happening in September. So there's a lot going on. This isn't going to go away. We are committed to that vision and need all the help that we can get.
It's such a worthy cause. It's so needed. It's so difficult to find specific men's services that are accessible and that, like you say, you provide the free help as well as the paid for help. So I'm so grateful that you've been able to come on the podcast, and really grateful that you've been so candid and open with your own story. And I really hope that anyone listening will reach out to the Blue Minds project or the Blue Minds approach, and connect with you and be able to have that conversation and to start on that journey. So, Mark, thank you very much indeed for your time today and for being so open.
Kate, no, thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge you because I think what you're doing at Amicable and through the Divorce podcast is phenomenal. I've recommended the app to a handful of women recently that have been in a divorce situation, and they just feel that the insight they gain through the podcast and by following the content is just invaluable. So please continue to do what you're doing, and we'll get there.
We will get there. I'm sure we will. If you want to find out about the Divorce Podcast, you can follow at @divorce_podcast on Twitter. And you can also subscribe to more of these podcasts at thedivorcepodcast.com, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for your time, Mark, and thank you all for listening too.
Thank you.